Hey guys, what is up? It's your girl, Grace Tori, and I'm back with a whole new podcast episode. Today we are going to be talking about the pros and cons of owning a pet in your 20s. I'm really excited. I have Evie with me, if you are watching. She is my dog that I got when I was 18. I am 25 now. She is 7. She was 4 weeks old when I got her. So it's been a wild ride. I also have some bunnies. I have a horse. We had a snake for a little while. So I do have like a lot of different experience, and I feel like I'll be able to offer a good amount of insight into this. So that's why we're doing this episode. If you're in college, if you're in your 20s and still trying to figure life out, this is a great resource if you are trying to figure out if you want to add a pet into your lifestyle. I do want to add a little disclaimer that it varies so much based on the species and even the breed of pet that you're thinking of getting. So I'm going to try and stay very general, cover a wide range of topics. But if there's a specific animal that you are really wanting to get, you can comment down below. If you're on a podcast platform where you can't comment, you can just go over to my Instagram and DM me, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can. I was an animal science major for a little while in college, so I have a pretty good insight. And then I also graduated as an equine science major, so horses. But I've also had so many animals, and experience is the best way to know. I have had cats. I know that's a really popular one. I've only had barn cats. I haven't had indoor cats, but I will do my best to help you guys out. So before I jump in, don't forget to follow on whatever platform you're currently listening or watching on, and let's go ahead and jump on in. I'm Grace Tori, and you're listening to That Girl the Podcast. Grab a beverage of choice and settle in, because the new episode is starting now. So I was trying to think of what way to kind of break this up and what would be the best way to give you guys all the tea. I think we're going to do cons first and then pros. There's more cons for sure, but the cons are not as impactful as the pros. So the pros definitely mean more. So don't get scared off by the cons. Definitely listen until the end before you make a decision. Like, I don't want you to listen to like 3 cons and be like, nope, not for me. I want you to listen all the way through. And a lot of this is varied by species. So example, like if you don't have as much time, there's definitely a pet out there that isn't as time consuming unless you have literally 0 time. Same with cost and things like that. So a lot of this is researching which is best for you. So I will actually start with that and say that a con is you do need to do a lot of research. I don't think this is necessarily a con, but a little like disclaimer. You should not get an animal until you have done a thorough amount of research on it, not just the species. So don't research or best things for a dog. I mean, do, but don't stop there. You also need to research the breed. So for example, Evie is a German Shepherd Husky. She happens to have dwarfism. That's why she's so small. But her brother is a German Shepherd Akita. So both of them have a lot of German Shepherd in them, which required a lot of research into the German Shepherd breed. I won't harp on it too long, but a German Shepherd requires a lot more time, a lot more enrichment, a lot more training. They actually truly enjoy training versus maybe like a lab who just wants to hang out and be your friend. Evie goes crazy if she doesn't have like puzzles and things to do because her brain is just working so much like a German Shepherd brain. So that's just a good example. Like, don't just research, oh, what do dogs need? Because German Shepherds need more than like some other dogs, and vice versa. Like a Belgian Malinois needs a lot more than a German Shepherd, so you need to know like what exactly you're getting and look into the research. You may find that you've been looking up a breed and you're like, this is not for me, and then you need to switch to another breed. Don't just go off aesthetics. We have a lot of friends who see our dogs and they're like, oh my gosh, they're so beautiful, I want a German Shepherd too. And I have told them, do not get one, like you live in an apartment or like you've never had a dog before. Maybe you should get this breed. So there is breeds that are right for your lifestyle situation. It just depends on you, how much time you're willing to put in, what your training experience and background experience is, where the dog is coming from. If you are getting an animal, yes, it's always great to adopt, don't shop if possible. But you do have to consider things like if they're an older dog from a shelter, they may have some behavioral trauma associated with them, which is fine. You can get a puppy from a breeder that still has some behavioral issues. But it is something to consider that if you are looking at animals from a shelter, sometimes they may be weary around men or women or kids, or there's some sort of trauma associated with them, especially if they're older. So that's just some right off the bat. Make sure you're doing research and you're not just pulling the trigger and getting something without doing a lot of research, talking to the person if it's like a dog that you know exactly what you want, do meetings in person. There's a lot of things that you should be doing before you're bringing them into your household, because they are a family member, and I am of the belief that you should not be giving an animal back or like it not work out and you give it back unless it's absolutely not, like something changes, maybe there's like an emergency that you didn't see coming, you know, situations like that where it's understandable. But if you knew coming into it, oh, maybe I'm not gonna have a ton of time, then maybe don't get a puppy that you're gonna have to devote a bunch of training on and then turn around and say, oh wait, this is actually a lot of work. Because yeah, it's a lot of work. You knew that before you got the puppy, so don't be that person. So after research, it's important to understand the expenses behind animals. It does vary by breed and it varies by species. So our dogs eat Purina dry food and they go to the bathroom outside. They're outside trained, so we don't have to spend money on puppy pads or anything like that. Their food is the same cost every month. Their vet expenses are really where it comes in, because I think to take both of them to the vet to do like their yearly round of shots and such, it's like $800. So that is where their cost is. Whereas like we probably spend just the essentials, not buying them toys or treats or anything that's a plus, but we definitely do that. Just the essentials, I'd say we probably spend between $30 and $50 on them a month, not including like water if we're really breaking it down to like utilities and stuff, because we really only buy them food in terms of utilities. And then we buy them like toys and stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily include that. I don't know. Toys are like, they have enough toys is what I'm saying. Once they have like the toy amount reached, you don't really need to buy them more. Like in terms of enrichment, they have plenty of puzzles and stuff to keep them busy. So it's not like we're buying more every single month after that initial cost. You know, the initial cost of like a bed, toys, collar, harness, which are crazy expensive. I'm currently getting my car dog approved with like a dog gate in the front so they can't jump in the front seat, and like dog harnesses, and it's expensive. I looked at harnesses yesterday and one harness was like $50. So those are initial costs, but in terms of like upkeep, it's between $30 and $50 a month, not including like non-essentials. I hope that made sense. Now, when you go over to bunnies, which are more similar to cats in the way that they use litter boxes, they're a little bit more antisocial. My lovely bunnies have to have hay. They shouldn't go more than 8 hours without hay. They should always have hay, but in emergencies, they shouldn't go longer than 8 hours. They eat pellets once a day. They have a litter box, which includes puppy pads, litter, things like that. They have like a pen that they stay in that needs different stuff. They need enrichment toys. They are more expensive than Evie and Luna, my dogs, because they require more on the day-to-day basis that you have to refill. However, when I take them to the vet, for both of them to get their yearly vet checks, it's like probably a little under $300 for both of them. So there's a big difference between spending $300 and $800 in one vet visit. So they do all of their costs throughout the year, and Evie and Luna do most of their costs once a year at the vet, and so it kind of balances out. But it is a difference in day-to-day expenses. Like you can save up for a yearly vet visit, whereas with the bunnies it's constantly like, oh, they're out of this, they need something else, oh, they're out of this, they need something else. And they do require a lot of enrichment toys because they are anarchists. That varies by breed of bunny, but my little guys love to wreak havoc, so they constantly need something to do. Just like Evie, if she doesn't have something to do, she wreaks havoc. As you can see, I got more high maintenance breeds in all of my species. I'm not even going to go into horses because they are so different in terms of cost. They are very expensive. Moondance has gotten down to a very reasonable price because I've had her since I was 12 and I'm in the equine community, so I've figured out how to make things work. I can't even put a range on it. That's a whole nother ball game. If you want to talk about owning a horse, I grew up on a horse farm, so I'm happy to talk to you about it. I'm happy to talk about your options. Definitely not something you should do without research, but I think that's really all I'm going to say about expenses. I just want you to have like a ground level understanding in the event that you've like never been around a pet, don't know costs. This of course is cost in Lexington, Kentucky. It's going to be way more expensive in like New York or LA, and it probably is less expensive in like the Midwest or somewhere like that. That is just a guess, but it does vary extensively based on where you are. It's more responsibility. I have like a feeding schedule for these guys. Everyone eats at 5. The bunnies get more hay at 8. The bunnies' light gets turned out at 10. The dogs go out 3 times a day, sometimes 4, and have like playtime outside. There is a strict schedule that they are on. Animals get very used to schedules, and I think that like cats are way more like chill in this aspect. They just want to like do their thing. They don't really need to go out every day. They don't need hay or anything like that. Whereas like Evie, she needs to go outside multiple times a day. Obviously, the bunnies need hay. The bunnies need their litter box cleaned anywhere from like every day to twice a week. It just depends on what they're doing that month or that week or that day or whatever. So varies greatly, but regardless, there's a lot more responsibility. You got to clean up after them. You need to build a environment that's safe for them, where they can't get into things. Like bunnies like to eat wires. Guess what? If there's anything plugged in here, this happens to be my office where they live, so there is a lot of things plugged in here. You need to have a wire cover. It needs to be high enough they can't reach it. There needs to be a barrier between. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with owning an animal, and it can make it a lot more difficult. I know when I was in college, responsibility wasn't exactly my favorite topic. I was just trying to live out my life as much as I can, hang out, party, do all those things, because I knew one day I was going to be like an adult, and that's really the last time you get to vibe and party and do all that before you're working full time and you're like adulting. So I still had Evie, and then I got a bunny my junior year, but I had a lot of responsibility that came with that. Which brings me to my next point, and that's can't do whatever you want whenever you want. So, for example, our families, Josh and I's family, both live an hour away in different cities. So my family lives in one city, they're an hour away. His family lives in another city, they're an hour away. We've gone up there multiple times where like it's been a Saturday and we've been like, oh, we're going to come back up on Sunday. And we could have just stayed the night, but we had animals, so we had to come home. Or in college, I would go over to my friend's house, maybe we would drink or like whatever. Obviously we were over 21 and we would be like, let's just stay here. And I'd be like, no, Evie's at home. I need to get home to Evie, which meant that either I wouldn't drink and I would just drive myself home. I was not walking home if I had been drinking because scary. Or I would take an Uber. I always like to take an Uber with someone else. I never like to do it by myself. So I planned ahead of time most of the time. But I personally did not like leaving Evie home because I had roommates. I had things like that you have to worry about. So responsibility is a big thing. Can't do whatever you want whenever you want. You can't just go on a spontaneous road trip. You can't you have to consider, oh no, their feeding time is at 5 p.m. I need to be home at 5 p.m. Like, for example, I get off work at 5. I work 5 minutes away. A lot of times I'll be with like my work friends and we'll be like, let's go grab drinks at the restaurant down the street. And I'll say, yeah, that's great, but I need to run home, take my dogs out, make sure they're fed, and then I can meet you there. I'll probably be about 30 minutes late. That's something to consider if that's like a huge inconvenience for you. For me, it's not because of all the pros I'm going to list that really outweigh these cons. But if that's something that bothers you, if you're someone who parties heavy and is in college, like if there's a lot going on in your life where you don't really want to give that up for an animal right now, that's totally understandable, but it is something that's like a big thing. Like, you can't just do whatever you want whenever you want. You have something at home who needs you at very specific times every single day. It can cause tensions in relationships. If you have a pet, which I had Evie before I met Josh, you kind of have to introduce them and say, yes, I do have a dog, like, we're a package deal, which to a lot of people, dogs are great, but there are people who are allergic to dogs or cats or bunnies or whatever. Like, Josh is allergic to the bunnies. He refuses to do anything with them because he's allergic, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But there are people who, that may be like a deal breaker. Obviously, if there's an emergency, he'll do it, but he really doesn't like to get super involved in that because of allergies, which is totally understandable. I have allergies as well. Maybe they just don't like pets and they don't want one. You know, even if this is a friendship where you live together, things like that. In college, like, there's a lot. Maybe it's not mine, so I'm not going to take care of it. Like, oh, hey, I'm running late. Can you feed my dog? No, it's not mine. It's your problem. Like, there are people out there who act like that. I know it's crazy because as a people pleaser, I can't tell people no for any reason ever. But there are people out there who say, like, it's not my pet. It's not my problem. So if you're getting into relationships, there can be some tension if they're not an animal person. Like I said, dogs are a little bit more accepted. Cats, depending on the person. But if you have like a bunny or something where, like, bunnies, if you don't stay on top of them and clean their space literally all the time, then they smell bad. That can cause tension. Like, the smell can be an issue. Maybe your dog's not great at potty training yet. Like, there are a lot of things that you have to consider when you are getting an animal. If you're in a relationship, before you get the animal, it should at least be a conversation. I'm under the belief that if it's not a serious relationship, like you've only been dating for a couple months, maybe you don't have to, like, have their permission, but you do need to at least have the conversation and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing, what are your thoughts, and take it from there. You have to clean a lot more. So Evie and Luna, like I said, they're potty trained, but they do bring mud inside the house. Like, they go outside to go to the bathroom, it's muddy, they will, like, can you hear my bunnies thumping? So you do have to clean more. For example, my dogs are potty trained, they go outside, they do their business, but they do bring mud inside when they walk back in and it's raining. I live in Kentucky. It rains a lot in the spring. There's been a lot of mud on our floor. And it's like, yes, I wipe their paws before they come inside, but they still get mud in here somehow. Also, they shed a lot, which means that there's a lot of hair. We gotta vacuum. We gotta clean. The bunnies shed a lot. The bunnies leave hay places. Like, there is a lot more cleaning associated with animals. I know for myself, like, when I lived with roommates, we were all very clean, and it was just me and Evie and my bunny. We were very, very clean, so it wasn't as bad. But then we got Luna, and he's a dirty, dirty dog. He loves to make messes. He loves to get into things. He loves being dirty. So that meant way more cleaning. So it does depend a lot on the animal and their personality, what they vibe with, and, like, also if they shed or not. If they're, like, we have dogs, I've babysat dogs, I grew up with dogs that didn't really like going outside, and so the mud thing wasn't a big deal. So it is something that varies based on the animal, but cleaning more is a big thing. We have air purifiers, like, all over our upstairs because we have carpets. Animals and carpets tend to cause a lot of allergies and just, like, stuffiness, so that's a thing. A lot of cleaning involved. I mentioned that they can have previous trauma. That can happen whether you're adopting from a shelter, you're adopting from, you know, your neighbor who can no longer have their dog. Like, they can have previous trauma. Evie has separation anxiety because she was so young. They told us she was 8 weeks old and she wasn't. She was 4 weeks old. And so she has a lot of separation anxiety because she has, like, a mother bond with me because she was ripped from hers so young, which is a thing that can happen. Which leads to, I had a lot of issues with it in college because she would freak out if I wasn't there because of her separation anxiety. And we got to a place where, like, my roommate was my best friend, and so she was fine once I moved in with her because she knew her, she trusted her, it was fine. But I couldn't, like until I moved in with her, it was a huge, huge deal. So that's something to consider. They can have emergencies. A good example of this is Luna J, our big old German Shepherd, got a splinter in his chest when he was like 8 months old. We didn't know about it until it turned into an abscess because he was really fluffy. So we had him on antibiotics for like 2 months and it just kept getting worse. So he ended up having to have surgery on his chest to have this abscess drained, have the splinter removed. And it was literally just like a tiny, tiny wood splinter, like the one you would get in your finger. But it was a big deal. He had to wear a cone for a while. I had to stay home with him for a couple of days. And it was really expensive. It ended up being like $900 when all was said and done. And that was something that we couldn't really have prevented. Like, he was just playing, and I guess he was chewing on a stick or something. We don't really know how it happened. But, you know, as soon as we saw it, we started going to the vet, getting it done. The antibiotics just happened to not work on him. Like, that was a big expense that we really couldn't have prevented at all. And he had an emergency, and it ended up being really, really expensive. So some things you can't prevent. We try to prevent as much as we can, but emergencies happen. They cost money. Evie has problems where, like, she has stomach issues. Luna has really bad stomach issues. But when Evie has stomach issues, you know it's an issue because she has the tummy of a lead pipe. Like, she has eaten so many things she definitely shouldn't have and been fine. And so when she has tummy issues, it's a big deal. We take her to the vet. That's another $200, $300 charge. Usually for them to just give her a nausea shot and then she's fine. But that's another emergency that has happened before. You know, the bunnies. There was one time that Braxton was flicking his ear a lot, which is a sign of, like, ear infection, things like that. And bunnies are really fragile, so I took him to the vet. And it turns out he was, like, happy because we got our other bunny, Bourbon. And so he was flicking his ears more because he was playing more and he was, like, more playful. Or that's what they told me. But I genuinely thought he had an ear infection because he was playing with his ears so much. So there's things like that where, like, that was probably $100 to $200 just for them to be like, no, he's just really happy he has a brother now. But it's like, you'd rather be safe than sorry. That's a huge symptom of ear infections. So I took him anyway. So those are just a couple examples where there are emergencies. Horses are very expensive. There's no cheap emergency with a horse. So that's a whole other situation when it comes to emergencies. Cats, I imagine, are similar to dogs. Like I said, ours were barn cats, so they were very self-sufficient. We thankfully never had an emergency with them. But those are something you do need some sort of backup plan for, whether it's a savings account. Some people have pet insurance. Some people have, like, a payment plan through their vet where they just pay a certain amount a month, and then if something does happen, that covers it. There is, like, pet credit where, like, you call and they're able to, like, loan you money. There's a lot of options, but you definitely need to know what they are and have a plan just in case something happens. You okay? Evie just sneezed. So I've already touched on this a little bit, but it does make it a lot harder to have roommates, live in an apartment, rent a house, all of these things that are very prevalent in your 20s. So your roommates have to be okay with your dog. There are a lot of roommates who say they like dogs, and then they find out that they don't like your dog. That is a common thing. It's happened for me where, like, I've been like, yeah, I love dogs, and then I found out, oh, I don't like my roommate's dog because they're not well trained and they, like, pee everywhere, whatever. When you have roommates, you really, really need to have, like, a good, solid understanding, and your dog needs to be very well trained because it's not fair to them and it's not fair to the dog that you didn't train them. Like, they need to be very potty trained, they need to be on a schedule, they need to understand when and when not to bark, things like that. If you have a roommate who understands animals, is an animal lover, they're usually a lot more forgiving than just, like, the average person, but it can be an issue. Living in an apartment, a lot of apartments say that you can't have an animal over, like, 20 or 25 pounds. They only allow certain animals, like cats or dogs. And even then, if they make any noise whatsoever, people can complain. You can get evicted. They also have limits on how many animals you can have. And renting in general is hard with animals because there is, like, a list of dogs that are and aren't approved. So, like, German Shepherds are on the list of animals that you can't have if you're renting most of the time. I think Rottweilers and Dobermans are also on there. There's pit bulls are on there. Like, there are some breeds that even if your dog is 10% that breed, you can't live there. And, like, yes, you can just not tell them that they're 10% that breed because it's not like they usually don't do a background check of, like, what exactly is your dog. But if they even resemble that, it can be an issue. So that is a big thing when it comes to roommates, living in an apartment, renting. You have to just be very aware of that. And it will probably cause some tension at some point because obviously dogs live a long time, cats live a long time, even bunnies live 10 to 15 years. Like, there are a lot of things, that's a long time for you to get in a situation where you're like, oh no, I need to get an apartment, like, I need to downsize, I need to get a roommate, times are tough. And you're gonna have to just be very aware of that, and you really need to make it as nice as possible for your roommate. Like, you need to be very, very attentive of them and what they need, and just be willing to compromise and do what's best not only for your animal but for them, because it's really scary if your roommate does not like like your dog. I had a roommate and she would literally kick my dog. She would abuse my dog. Evie, the one that was just in here, she went to go play with her brother. But like, I didn't know any of this. Like, I did not know any of this for a long time until I saw it happen. And it scarred me for life, and it's something so scary that you need to just like be aware of, especially if it's a roommate you don't know that well. No vacations unless the animals have somewhere to stay or they go with you. This is really hard, because if you send them to a boarding place, that's an extra cost. Usually around here, again, it varies very much based on where you live, but usually it's between like $40 to $120 per night for them to go somewhere. And if they go somewhere, I know a lot of like the official boarding places don't let them out that much. They stay in a kennel. They go out to play like maybe an hour a day, but they're in a kennel the rest of the time. There's other places where like it's out of people's houses and things like that, but then there's your own set of issues with that. So just do your research. It's a lot harder than just booking a vacation and going, because you have to really make sure that their plans are narrowed down. I've mentioned this time and time again, but animals are time consuming. You have to make time to feed them, water them, take them outside, clean their litter box, take them for walks, all of the things. Play with them. Playing with them is something people don't really think about, but you need to set time aside to actually like just engage with them, play tug of war, pet them, give them love. Like, that's not something that people really account for. They account for, oh, I need to walk them, that'll take this much time. Oh, I need to feed them, that won't take that much time. But people don't think like, oh, I need to set aside like an hour a night to just hang out with my animals. You know, you can watch TV while you do it or whatever, but they really need more time than you think. The last con that I have on here is they are more expensive when they're older. So their lifespan varies so much by breed and by species, but typically it's between 10 and 15 years old where you start seeing the cost spike. My childhood dog just passed away in October. He passed away when he was 17, and he was on monthly medications for like his heart. He went to the vet for emergencies and like scares multiple times, which was a cost every single time. He had to get shots a lot. And that is common for most older animals, regardless of breed. They require a lot more. If you have a horse, they require like their teeth to be done. A lot of animals require their teeth to be pulled when they're older. Their diet changes and they need soft food, which is more expensive. And, you know, bunnies get older, they get more fragile. There's a lot of things associated with that. So there's a lot that changes when they're older, and even though you get them at 8 weeks old and you don't really want to think about them dying, like, you need to prepare for when they're a senior, because they do cost a lot more. They do require a lot more time if they're someone who they need to be under watch. Maybe we had a dog who he was incontinent and he had to have diapers, which meant that you had to like wash him and make sure he was good and he didn't get any infections. It was just like getting a whole different animal that requires a lot more time and attention. And that's what you're signing up for when you get a puppy, okay? You need to understand that, like, when they're a senior, they're still the same animal, and you are still responsible for them. And you can't just kick them to the curb, and you need to just prepare for that now. Make sure that you have savings, you have it all set to go, because they gave you their entire world. You can take care of them when they're a senior and give them the older life they deserve. They're the elderly life they deserve. Now that we've talked about all the things that make it difficult to own an animal, let's talk about all the pros. There are some great pros. The first being that you're less lonely and you have a built-in best friend, companionship, like, especially if you're single. When I was single, I would watch Netflix with my dog and my bunny every night. We'd just lay in bed, I would get some popcorn, and we would just like watch TV, and that was my little family. You know, on my worst days as an adult, Evie has been there, and she's been like my shoulder to cry on. I don't feel lonely because I have my animals. Obviously I have friends and stuff, but like, I think we all have those moments where we're at home and we get a little lonely, and it's like that doesn't happen as much because I have my animals. They're fun. Like, it's just fun to have a pet, in my opinion. You know, we go to the dog park, we go get pup cups, we dress up for Halloween, we hang out together, we play. There's just so much fun associated with having an animal, regardless of like what species. Especially like I can go ride my horse. That's super fun for me. these are things that you wouldn't be able to do. I mean, you could like maybe go do lessons on a horse, but aside from that, you can't really rent out a pet dog. Like, you have to either have one or not, unless you decide to board dogs and stuff, but that's a whole nother thing. So having animals are so much fun. Literally a lot of work, but so much fun. They can bring you friendships. So for example, I met a couple of my friends through the dog park because there were girls my age that were also bringing their dogs to the dog park. Obviously, we have that in common. We started talking, now we're friends. Also, even at work, like, I have pictures of my pets up there and someone will see it and they'll say, oh my gosh, you have bunnies, like, I grew up with them, and then that starts a conversation. There's a lot of different ways that you can make friends through having pets and through your pets, so that is a great pro. Free hugs. I hug my pets, especially my dogs and my horse. Really everyone but the bunnies. I hug the bunnies, but they're a little bit more fragile because they're a little bit smaller. So the hugs are worth it. They help you stay active. So they require a lot of exercise. Like, so Evie's a little bit overweight right now. Luna's not, but I always say when we have to go for walks, Evie needs to lose weight and Luna needs to lose some energy, because Luna is so full of energy. I mean, he could go forever, like literally forever, and not be tired. So they keep you active because you're playing with them, you're trying to tire them out, you're taking them for walks, and they really just like motivate you, like, oh, let's go to the park. We have nothing to do, and like, you kind of give me an excuse to go walk at the park, because like, I would feel weird walking at the park by myself, but I feel better having my dog with me, not just because I feel like I have more of a reason, but I also feel safer having my dog with me. So they help you stay active. They motivate you. I have really bad days, but I look at my dog and I say, I gotta provide for you, you know, like, I promised you you're gonna have this lifestyle and I need to provide that for you, so I'm gonna keep going. Like, on my worst days, I look at my animals and I'm like, this is all for you guys. Like, this is for you so that you can have the best life. And it really, really motivates me. Coming from someone who is in her 20s and does not have any children, they are like my version of children. Like, I provide for them. I am motivated to work for them. I want to give them the best life possible. And they keep me going when I don't feel like providing that for myself. And like, myself isn't enough of a motivation. The last pro that I have is they help exercise my ability to problem solve. There have been times where, like, the bunnies, for example, the bunnies like to eat the carpet under my chair that I'm currently sitting in. Why? I don't know. Why is it only the carpet under there? I don't know. But that gives me a problem to solve. What can I put under the couch so that they can't get under it? They'll eat through wood. They'll eat through anything soft. They'll hurt themselves on concrete. So what do I put? I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm gonna try plastic totes, I think, but they might eat through those. But you see what I'm saying? Like, that's a problem that we need to problem solve. The dogs will do things if we don't keep an eye on them, which usually can be solved by us keeping an eye on them or putting them, like, in a certain space where they are in that one area. Like, at night, I usually lock them in the bedroom with me if Josh is, like, out and about, because I know that he's probably not going to keep the closest eye on them, and they'll probably get into the trash or something. Like, say he falls asleep on the couch, they could get into the trash. So that's an example of like problem solving. Like, you just have to make sure, like, oh, maybe when we're downstairs the dogs can't get upstairs, so we need to put something there, but it's too wide to put like a dog gate there, so we need to put something else. Like, there's a lot of problem solving that comes with having a pet. So that is another pro for me, because it exercises my brain and helps me to creative problem solve, which I then use for the podcast, for work, for life in general. It just keeps me exercised in my problem solving muscle. So that is it for me. I personally believe that animals are the best thing in the entire world. I love them so much. Any pro outweighs the cons 1,000 times. They are my entire world, my whole heart, and I love them. But I do also understand if you heard the cons and you're like, nope, not for me, maybe in 5 years. So yeah, if you have any more questions, comment down below, DM me on Instagram, DM me on TikTok. I'm happy to talk about them, give you advice, talk to you one-on-one about what's going on. I'm really passionate about this, as you can tell, and I want you to get an animal that's right for you. I want the animal to have the best life possible. And it's so fun to have a pet in your 20s because you're growing up and it's like you're growing up together. But I do know that it's hard and it comes with a lot of challenges. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. I upload every single Wednesday and Sunday. If you're watching this on the Sunday night it comes out, I hope you have a great night. If you're watching this any other day, I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, or night. I love you so much, and I'll see you in my next podcast episode. Bye, guys.
You was the first